First question. It is a question from a guest. In Long Paul's biography, there is a story. I assume before attaining Anagami, where he has so much lust, he has a layman build him a walking path in the forest so he can hitch up his sabong. What's Ajahn top 5 emergency tips when after contemplating the lust psychosis, when lust psychosis hits?
Oh, it just depends on the situation, doesn't it? There's many ways that we're hit. Probably more common or more normal is just small moments of lust, as I touched on in the talk. You just see something that attracts you. So normally speaking, no, not always, but normally speaking, the opposite sex, visions, images, whether it's online, in a magazine or in person, you see somebody that you find attractive. Even if you're in the forest, as in the case of Ajahn Chah, that story you mentioned, even if there's no one around, you have your own mind, your memory will throw up images. And particularly if you're practicing in a very mindful way, very determined way, challenging your lust, challenging the basis of your lust, which is this habitual attraction to the various things you like, the aspects of the body that you find attractive, the aspects of not just the physical body, but clothing, smell, all the different things that you may find attractive. Even if there's no one around, you can your mind will bring up images to kind of trick you, delude you. So sometimes it's an actual image of somebody or being in contact with someone, seeing them, being around them. Sometimes it's just internal in your mind. So you have to have strategies to deal with that, don't you? So what did the Buddha say to Ananda, in terms of dealing with women, and it would be much the same for a woman dealing with their lust for men? He said, best of all, don't see them. If you don't see them, you're not stimulating that part of your mind. Your mind goes quiet. It's not going to absolutely remove your lust, but it will help keep it quiet so that maybe you can contemplate the root causes of it. So the best of all, don't see them. If you have to see them, don't talk to them. Maybe you see women, like as a monk, you live in a monastery, or women come to visit the monastery. You go out traveling anywhere, you'll see women, but don't talk to them. So there's less engagement, less intimacy, less opportunity for you to lose your mindfulness and start falling into lust. If you have to talk to them, keep it brief. The Buddha said 6 sentences of Dhamma. So, someone asks you some Dhamma, well, monks teach all the time, don't we? And sometimes it's women, but you keep it brief and keep it to the Dhamma, not about worldly things, to avoid flirting and intimacy. Of course, as a monk, if you're a monk or a nun, you also have other rules, like you always have to have a chaperone, that kind of thing. But it's the basic principle, whatever your defilement is, whether it's stimulating aversion, fear, or lust, first thing is to try and minimize the sense contact and the exposure to the things that stimulate that defilement. So you can manage it better, you can be more peaceful, more at ease. But then you also have to introduce skillful means. So number one, be mindful. Be mindful of what you're looking at, what you're thinking, and then wise reflection. So a lot of, you see the Satipatthana Sutta, the first foundation of mindfulness is all about the body, and particularly going into investigating the body, the 32 parts of the body, the 4 elements, the 10, what we call the 10 corpse meditations. And if you really want to start tackling lust, this is the approach you have to make. But you can do it in a very gentle, small, step-by-step way. So like dealing with lust, first of all, you don't even think about other people's bodies and what they're doing and what they look like. You just look at your own body. When you have a bath, when you're eating food, when you're going about your business, notice the unattractive side of the human body. the smells, the grease, the spittle, the urine, the feces, all the bits on the outside that you can see and notice, and then from time to time imagine the inside. As a young monk, we used to go and see autopsies all the time in Thailand because it's something that monks are allowed to go and do if it's arranged properly. And it's very helpful. You get to see a human body lying on a table. They could be male, female, young, old, but they open them up and do an autopsy, dissect it, pull out the different organs. And that gives you a very good idea of what the human body is like on the inside. And it's not very attractive. It smells awful, looks awful. It changes your perspective. Of course, you do that once, it may just briefly give you a little bit of insight. But if you do it regularly and you bring that insight into your practice and develop it regularly, perceptions of the unattractiveness of the body, lust is going to start being challenged. And of course, it's not easy, but you keep doing it. You keep working at it in many different ways. And Ajahn Chah used to say very ordinary things will help. Like he said, when you go bindabata as a monk, and as a layperson, you can do it as well in different situations. You go on alms round as a monk. You go into the village or you go to a line of people. There'll be people of different ages, men and women, young, old. So you notice, there's young ones, how your mind maybe is attracted to young forms, because that's what lust is like usually. Okay, but then look at the older ones. Look at the wrinkly hands and the twisted teeth and the grey hairs and all the signs of aging that you see in people around you or in yourself when you look at yourself. And you're balancing out this obsession with what is youthful, attractive, desirable by saying, well, the reality is that even the most beautiful person ages, they change. Nothing lasts, and eventually everybody dies. And imagine a corpse. And say as a monk, we regularly go to funerals, you see corpses, and corpses are not that attractive. So you see that over and over again, your lust is being challenged, your mind is being taught, and you start to let go of some of your old habits maybe. So it's a step-by-step process dealing with lust, from simple sense restraint and keeping precepts, following the rules maybe, to developing mindfulness, insight into impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self, and asupa, the unattractiveness of the body. It's a whole range of practices that you keep developing over time.
Thank you, Longpo. To the person who has asked that question, I think you had a follow-up question about asupa. I think you are perhaps in the monastery. It might be good if you ask Longpo directly after that so that you have some clarification about the arupajanas and etc. Okay, Longpo, there are several questions from people here in the Zoom. If I may be allowed to ask the first question. The first question comes from Hui Hun. Ajahn, can you explain a bit about neutral feelings? And what do we do about neutral feelings? Is there a problem with having neutral feelings? Thank you.
There's no problem with it, but as you're probably realizing, they're hard to catch, hard to notice because they're neutral. We've become so addicted to the extremes of pleasure and pain. That's what we're used to noticing, getting involved with, thinking about, reacting to. Neutral feeling doesn't stimulate us very much. That's the whole point, it's neutral. So the Buddha said if I remember correctly, for the unenlightened mind, without mindfulness, neutral feelings, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, will tend to stimulate dullness. Literally, you might end up in a state of dullness when there's not much stimulation. And notice that, there'll be a Sunday afternoon when nothing to do. Today is Sunday, isn't it? Sunday afternoon, nothing to do. You're sitting there, nothing to do. Nobody watches TV anymore, but there's nothing online. Nobody's contacting me. There's nothing to eat, nowhere to go. And you're kind of sitting there, so there's no stimulation. but you don't feel bad, there's no pain, but there's no stimulation, nothing exciting, nothing pleasant. So you'll probably be having a lot more neutral feelings than normal, and so what happens? You fall asleep. Everyone falls asleep with neutral feelings because it just makes your mind go dull. If you're not asleep, then you're just kind of in this dull, drifting, deluded state. So they tend to promote delusion. Pleasant feelings tend to promote lust, greed, attachment. Unpleasant feelings tend to promote aversion, fear, anxiety. Neutral feelings tend to promote dullness, unawareness, ignorance. And so they say one of the dangers of a lot of attachment and identification with neutral feelings is the mind is going to this sort of dull state, whether you're awake or asleep, this dull state, more like an animal state. And you notice some activities humans do actually make them kind of numb to feelings. So something like drinking alcohol or taking drugs, maybe the first part of it, there's a rush, there's pleasant feelings, that's the attraction. But then there's a plateau when they wear out, or the mind gets used to the pleasure, say, and then it goes dull. So drink and drugs tend to promote dullness of mind, more like an animal, so be careful. Even just in your body, when you're scanning your body as you do a meditation, say, and you notice neutral feelings, you notice how you don't notice neutral feelings. That's the whole point. You run over them, you miss them because there's nothing there. A lot of your body is actually giving you neutral feelings. So say you have some pain one day, you have pain on your left knee or something, or go to another part of your body where it's feeling neutral. Just become fully mindful of that area. It may help you balance and cope with the pain better when you notice how many neutral feelings you have in your body. Or in a situation where you're being very stimulated with either something very unpleasant, painful, either mentally painful or physically painful, or something very pleasant, very attractive, very exciting, stimulating, either mentally or physically. And then when that fades, and that's what feeling does, it fades, quite often you go to neutral feeling next. And how neutral feeling doesn't stimulate you, but because you've been stimulated before, quite often neutral feeling is associated with something negative, even though it's not painful. It's just not stimulating. So like boring, not what I want. And then we often ignore it, miss it, we're not very mindful of it, and yet it's there. And even the same with extreme pain, suffering, mental suffering, all kinds of anguish and despair, all kinds of stuff. When it finishes or subsides, quite often you go to a more neutral state of mind. But again, you don't fully appreciate it, you're not fully aware of that because you've been so caught up in the trauma, you don't notice what comes next. But as you practice more mindfulness, you become aware of these changes and you realize even when things are really bad and a lot of despair, or you're depressed, you're sad, there may also be moments when you're feeling very neutral. It's just you normally don't see them, you're not aware, but now maybe as you practice mindfulness, you become aware of them. So neutral feelings are kind of interspersing between pleasure and pain a lot of the time. Now as you practice mindfulness, you'll be mindful of them. And so for an Aryapugala, neutral feeling is pleasant. It's not particularly stimulating, but it's not painful and it's quite okay. For the unenlightened mind, it tends to be seen as something not very good. So your actual attitude changes as you become more mindful.
Thank you, Lampa. Okay, there are quite a few typewritten questions that's been thrown into the chat box. Let me pick up a few to ask. Second question from Lai San. Lampa, will seclusion help cultivation of the indriyas as compared to constantly being around with people?
Definitely. How much you can achieve will just depend on your situation. So if you have a very busy lifestyle, work, and maybe socializing as well, well, try and value seclusion as an important part of life, and then try to find ways to achieve some seclusion at least sometimes. So even in one day, you can have the seclusion of your bedroom or your quiet space in your home. If you can develop one, have one. Even if you can't have one in your home, and some people have very busy, noisy homes, maybe go to a quiet space outside your home, in a park, or say when I was practicing Buddhism as a student, one of my quiet spaces for a bit of secluded meditation was the library, the university library. I'd go there because it's quiet and there's a lot of quiet corners. You can just sit and meditate. I'd do studies and then maybe do some meditation. You have to find your quiet, secluded places, even if it's only for 15 minutes, 1 hour, whatever. Some people sit in their car, in their coffee break, and meditate when they're at work because the work is too busy and the coffee break with other people is too noisy and too much chat, so they go to their car. You have to be smart and find your quiet place for maybe short breaks in a normal day. And then at sometimes in your life, take the time to go on a meditation retreat where maybe they keep noble silence, and it's set up either in a monastery or a retreat center or somewhere where you can really be quiet as well. We have to be proactive here. You can't expect to always get perfect seclusion, but from time to time you may try and set it up for yourself just to help you experience what it's like being totally alone in a quiet place. And often at first it's challenging. The first period of seclusion you'll find difficult because you've got your old habits. You want to talk to people, you want to look at your phone, you want to do all these things, think about many things, you want to be stimulated. So you have to be patient with the first period of your seclusion, but then as you start to learn how to be in seclusion, you probably enjoy it. Quite often by the end of, say the end of your retreat time in seclusion, you don't really want to return. And that's another problem in itself. Sometimes we get attached to our seclusion, and Ajahn Chah used to talk about this a lot, the monk who's addicted to his cave or his quiet place, and he can meditate and it's all good and nobody's bothering him, and then he comes back to the monastery and has to deal with other monks and visitors, and there's work and duties, and he gets all upset. And Ajahn Chah is sort of raising his eyebrows saying, hold on, you had this good samadhi and mindfulness in your cave and you come back to the monastery and it's all falling apart? Maybe there's some wisdom is lacking there. So even though seclusion is helpful for mindfulness and developing samadhi, you also need wisdom. And even in a busy life situation, you're going to need some wisdom to deal with that. Don't forget that. Seclusion alone is not enough to realize the Dhamma. You need to use wise reflection as well.
Lampo, thank you for that. Would you say that that kind of advice would also be for you to deal with, say, hurtful comments from other people, and how others are trying to inundate you with their wisdom?
Everything, like we're being bombarded with information, social media, conversations, other people have their agenda, of course, everything. We have to know our limits. So seclusion is sometimes just, turning your phone off or not attending some event or, something that's not absolutely essential. You maybe cut it out of your day because you say, I need a bit more rest today or more quiet time for myself. Or skillful ways, you've been talking to someone and maybe it's not going well, you disagree over things and you can see maybe you end up with bad feeling or even an argument. So maybe you end the conversation quickly, get some seclusion, meaning you get away from that conversation to avoid making things worse. There's what you might call very short-term seclusion is sometimes necessary, or temporary seclusion just to help manage a situation or help yourself in a situation, as well as the sort of more obvious sort of physical seclusion of going off to a quiet place. There's different kinds of seclusion.
Yeah, Kay, perhaps that's the answer to your question about moderating the kind of seclusion you can have with your friend who is perhaps trying to be helpful, but it comes across as being stressful. So you might want to consider Luang Por's suggestions. So, okay, answers to your questions as well. Let me post a question from Jennifer. Luang Por, Jennifer's question is this. She has pain during meditation. Her question is, how do you deal with pain during the Anapanasati meditation?
Try to keep a good attitude towards the pain. If it's one that you can't get rid of, you can't just change your posture a little bit and the pain will go. If it's always there or keeps returning, try to keep a good attitude. So be patient with it. Try not to endlessly think about it. So that's part of your practice anyway, is to put your attention on the breath and let go of the thoughts you have about, say, painful feelings and so on. So as long as you can tolerate it, and I know you may reach a point where you can't tolerate it, you've got to stop your meditation or get up or do something else. And that's also one solution, is to do walking meditation perhaps. But if you're sitting and there's pain and it's recurring, try to be patient, try to put all your attention on the breath. That's your first kind of aim, I would say. And just have to be very patient with it. But if it persists and maybe it's too difficult to stay with the breath, or if your mindfulness is getting stronger with the breath and you're feeling more confident, either way, maybe the next step is to actually turn your attention to the breath, to the pain itself. Make that the center of your attention. So send your mind to wherever that pain in the body is and make it the object of your mindfulness, and also develop some wisdom and understanding around it. So you can ask questions like, where is this pain? Is this pain always there? Is it constant, like always, every moment, always there? Or is it coming and going? Because a lot of pain, it's there for a while, then it disappears, or it fades, or it's more intense and then less intense. Does it move? Does it change? It can be reduced down to a little pinprick and then it can spread out again all over the place. Getting to know the pain by just asking questions and looking at it more as a phenomena rather than usual default reaction is just my pain. We take ownership of it and that makes it very hard, and you get a lot of negative thoughts and it's hard to be with. But if you're now looking more just as the observer, observing the painful feeling, asking questions, becoming mindful of it, but without taking ownership or reacting of it, just knowing it. That's your aim, to be able to know the pain as just a painful feeling. And you'll see, if your mindfulness is quite continuous and quite strong, maybe you can do that. We can often be with quite a lot of pain because we're not making anything more out of it, we're just knowing it. But as the mindfulness slips, the negative thoughts come up, we shift in our seat and we start to react to it, and then it'll be very difficult. So just see how much you can endure as far as the pain, but your real number one aim is to be mindful. Mindful first of your meditation object, and then to investigate the pain itself.
Thank you. One final question, that's because that's all the time that we have from Luang Por. The final question here is from Larry. Larry wants to know, Luang Por, hate and happiness are transient states of mind. What is true mind in itself? How does one witness true mind?
It's the quality of knowing. As a human being, you have the physical body, and then you have this ability to know things. We use our senses as the kind of doorway. So you see, you hear, you taste, you smell, you touch. But even if you cut all of the 5 external senses off, you've still got your mind. And your mind is what knows. It's aware, it knows. But of course, the untrained mind knows wrongly. We know with all kinds of add-ons. We have a sense of personal identification with whatever we're knowing. So it's, I know, and then there's something you know, the object of what you know, and you like it, you don't like it, your opinion. It all becomes more complicated. There's a lot of mental proliferation. But as you practice more mindfulness, maybe you get more in touch with just this very natural, I don't like using the word pure, but you know what I mean, the more kind of pure, natural knowing that it's just knowing, and it's quiet and still, but not adding anything on or creating any suffering out of the conditions. So we say just knowing conditions, whether it's physical or mental conditions, as just that much, just things arising and ceasing, but the knowing is just knowing. So it's very neutral, very peaceful. You're developing that more and more through your meditation. So maybe there'll be periods, short periods, where you're just knowing, but not suffering, not attaching. Sometimes we say that's the empty mind, meaning empty of self-identity, empty of grasping. It's just knowing. So seeing is just seeing, hearing, just hearing. Knowing the mind itself is just knowing the mind, without adding or creating anything else. If you practice a lot, then you might well experience periods like that. And you can develop that more and go to that more and more. And you get a good rest from everything, and there's no suffering there.
Thank you, Luang Por. Larry, I hope that answers your question.